Through the Leadership Lens is brought to you by Thompson Autogas. Thompson Autogas is the industry's gold standard turnkey solution for all your autogas needs. From funding to refueling and everything in between, Thompson Autogas is there to support your fleet every step of the way.
Hello and welcome to another Through the Leadership Lens, a podcast presented by the Women in Propane Council. I am Freddie Riddler.
And I'm Bridget Kidd.
And today's special guest is Chad Kroening. He is the VP at Belke Bottled Gas in the great state of Wisconsin. Unless you're a Minnesota fan, we don't like people from Wisconsin. Chad, welcome to the podcast and tell us a little bit about yourself.
So I'm Chad Kroening. I've been working in the propane industry for 20 plus years. I guess being from Wisconsin is a good thing when you know Freddie. You can always take him to a blowout Vikings game and, let us laugh at him a little. So that's a good thing. But other than that, outside of propane industry, I'm a golfer. My kids are golfers. And I'm a church organist, which probably is something that very few people in this audience have a clue about. So it's kind of interesting when I get to travel around. I look at things that are way different than what other people look at when they're sightseeing, if you will. But as far as in the propane industry, pretty active. I haven't been on a PERC board yet, but I am on the NPGA's executive committee currently. I've been the Propane PAC chairman. I'm the Benchmarking Council chairman currently. I'm still on the Governmental Affairs Committee and probably something else that I'm forgetting. But, that's how it works.
Well, Chad, we're excited to have you. It sounds like your calendar is wide open without that much happening.
Just don't ask my wife.
Hey, Chad. So our podcast with the Women in Propane Council is about leadership. So can you tell us a little bit about what leadership means to you?
Yeah, sure. I'm a little bit old school probably compared to most people. I'm still a believer in, doing what you say you're supposed to be doing and not do as I say, not like I do. I like to be hands-on with the guys. I don't mind hopping in a truck and doing a job with somebody. I want to make sure that all my employees, management-wise, understand all the other roles that they're either dispatching or managing. So we do a lot of cross-training. And then, the other thing I would say is my full title says Vice President of Safety and Commercial Operations. And the safety part of that's a big deal in our industry, right? The only thing anybody ever hears is the bad parts. And it's important to me, it's important to our company, and it's important to our customers at the end of the day that we provide a safe, reliable service to them. And we really put a focus on safety, which has changed the leadership style of a lot of people that work for me to kind of focus on that safety first mentality. So that's kind of what I roll leadership up into, and that is making sure that you're happy doing what you're asking other people to do.
That's great, Chad. Listening to all the other organizations that you're part of, how do you bring some of that safety leadership to those other organizations? Because essentially, except for governmental affairs, I suppose, but I see you at the NPGA Benchmarking Council meetings, at the board of director meetings. Do you bring some of that safety leadership with you? Do other people say, there's Chad, he may or may not know a little bit about some safety with his role at Belke Bottled Gas?
Yeah, 100%. What's interesting is outside of the NPGA, I'm also the underwriting committee chair for our insurance company. So a lot of people know that. A lot of people who insure with us know that. So it kind of gets around. I mean, this last benchmarking council meeting we had down in Houston, I was approached by somebody at the bar after hours and, hey, I heard you do this. Let's talk about how we get more involved and how we be more proactive. But let's go all the way back to, it's interesting when you talk about no safety correlation to governmental affairs, if you will, or propane pack. I mean, we have those conversations there as well. It's like, well, part of the reason why we push certain things with governmental agencies sometimes has a lot to do with safety, right? And it has a lot to do with how you safely use propane or how you safely deliver propane. Uh, or, let's take the one that's my favorite, and that's uh, the greenhouse gas reductions and the CO2 reductions of propane autogas, right? And what that means to the people who use propane school buses, right? So, safety is kind of that revolves around topic in most of my conversations.
I think when we're talking a lot about safety right now in the industry, right? And the number of incidents and incident prevention and first responder training and kind of all of the components of safety. And I would argue that leadership in safety is such a priority for leadership within a company, right? You have a responsibility to protect your employees and your employees to their customers and their customers to the community, and it goes on and on and on. But that can be, like you're saying, a lead by example, right? And are there other areas in maybe your leadership trajectory where that lead by example has been so critical? Maybe not life or death in the way that safety is, but is there another time in your career that you've had that same level of expectation to lead by example?
Yeah, and I will probably, I guess, throw a benchmarking council example in there for this one because it's probably the most relevant and the ones that we get feedback on, right? And we've had a lot of conversations over the years about different ways we do different things, whether it's lifting or turning or pulling a hose. And we recently, within the last 2 years, had quite a bit of conversation about ergonomics and how that looks in a job of a cylinder delivery driver. And we had this conversation in benchmarking, and nobody really had a great a great story to tell about how to train guys to lift correctly all the time when they're out in the field, how to show them what that looks like. And I took it kind of upon myself to go back to our group and say, all right, let's find a way that I can put this in visuals for the group, and we can come back and say, hey, look, this is the important part, right? And so through our insurance company, we got involved with something called an ergo evaluator, and we brought them in and they watched guys do different jobs. And they were not only to my company, they were to another member company of benchmarking and NPGA. And we came up with some statistics that were interesting. Some like heat maps of the body that shows what's being affected when you're doing certain lifting jobs, right? Filling cylinders on a dock versus taking them in and out of a truck.
Mm-hmm.
And I kind of sat back and I looked at it and I said, yeah, this changes the way we're going to train people. I took it to my group of benchmarking council members, which is 9 other people, and everybody got back to me with feedback and was like, yeah, this is a good idea. Where do I get my hands on this? So, okay, turn them to their insurance companies. And because I'm the chairman of the benchmarking council at the time, I actually brought, and Freddie, you were probably at that meeting. I actually brought the Liberty Mutual folks in on behalf of our insurance company to take a look at these results from these ergo evaluators that they did at my place and this other company's place. And we showed nothing that's personal, right? But we
Mm-hmm.
showed like the heat map of a person's blurred out body and showed, where the stresses are during different actions while you're filling and delivering a propane cylinder. And we shared that with the entire group at lunch. So, the impact was now council wide. So I think that's one of the places where I've felt like hands on, being able to figure it out, do it yourself, and bring it to the group leadership has been important. And that's not the only one. I mean, Freddie, you've seen a few others. There's quite a bit of safety stuff that comes up in benchmarking council, because it's one of those things that you don't necessarily, benchmark's not the right word for it, because everything's not equal in that. It's not a KPI. It's not something your productivity is based off of. But it is when something happens and you can't measure your KPIs for a day, a week, a month because of something that happened. So yeah, I mean, that's kind of my answer to one of the examples I'd give for why or how I've brought different safety things to the leadership front.
Yeah, and that's great, Chad. I hear your name at board of director meetings, benchmarking council meetings. I always looked up as a mentor in some point that you were my mentor. Just kind of always having that question. I always felt like you were always there to answer any type of questions personally, and it's been great to have that in the industry, because it is a very it's a big industry, but it's very small. And if you know the right people to talk to, you can learn a lot. You can gain a lot of information, gain a lot of knowledge. As you may or may not know, the Women Propane Council, they have a mentorship program called the Knowledge Exchange. So I'm going to plug that real quick, like I normally do. Do you see yourself mentoring other people in the industry, Chad? I mean, considering you're in the benchmarking group, you're the chairman of the benchmarking council group, you're very active in the NPGA. Do you find other people that kind of latch on and look up to you for those questions or help?
Well, it's a little scary to think about, but sure. Obviously, I've just realized that I'm your mentor, so I can teach you some things about which football team to cheer for. But I full circle is not the right word, but I've had mentors in this industry as well, right? People who've brought me to where I am now. People who, if I wouldn't have known or met at certain times in my career, I probably wouldn't sit on half the councils I sit on, be in a leadership role at NPGA. Just probably wouldn't have done that. And I'll tell you that one of my mentors is. I'm thinking I can throw a name out here. You can edit this.
You can.
But the person that I would say is my role model, mentor, if you will, kind of got me more involved, is Stuart Weedeye from Blossman. And when I came to my first NPGA event, it was Propane Days. It was in 2013, and we were talking autogas. We were talking, clean energy for the future. We weren't really talking renewables yet at the time, but we were talking about all those things. And at the same time, we were talking about this propane shortage, right? And calm, cool, and collected is, to say the least, about just the way a lot of the folks on the officer team at NPGA carried themselves at the time. And I was asked by Stuart if I would join the NPGA's Governmental Affairs Committee moving forward when he became the chairman that next June. And it was kind of one of those things, right? I've been to a bunch of meetings, never really got involved. It was the first time in my lifetime, and Stuart probably would tell you differently, but he was like a breath of fresh air at the time. I've been watching a bunch of, older folks run the organization for a long, long time. And Stuart's one of the first people that rolls in there to me, being, younger than a lot at the time. And it just was good, right? Because it's somebody who's, out every day running their business. And it just became that I'm going to watch what he does. I'm going to see where he goes. It was kind of my mentor, if you will, without him knowing it. And I kind of feel like that same role is maybe more where I think that folks look at me, right? I'm not great at hopping into a mentor program and holding somebody's hand. They tried making me a board buddy at a meeting, and the person they had me being a board buddy with knew all the people there already. And I was like, all right, well, you got this. I'm just, let me know if you need something. Uh, but, the folks who, more along the lines of, Freddie coming along and saying, hey, I've kind of always looked at you as a mentor. I get that, right? I think that that's more my style of mentorship, right? Just people that want to latch on and observe, ask questions when they want to. I'm more than happy to have this conversation with anybody at any time.
What about Chad? You're obviously dedicate a lot of your time, mostly personal time, I would imagine, participating at the association level. You mentioned you're a organist at your church. What do you get out of spending time professionally and personally volunteering for these organizations? Unless, of course, you're getting paid handsomely by the church.
I have yet to have an organization pay me handsomely at all. I've had the privilege of doing some staff dinners with both PERC folks and NPGA folks, which I guess is probably the most compensation I've ever received. But at the end of the day, and I wish I was doing this in my work office, because I have probably 6 or 7 2-inch ring binders full of business cards and networking that I've done over the years. And that's probably since, 10 years, probably 10, 11 years. At the end of the day, whether it's something personally, professionally, I have contacts from within this industry that I can call and talk to about, lots of different things. I'll give you a couple quick examples. I mean, I have probably 3 of those ring binders full of safety directors, right? And another one full of folks who are people's legal counsels and people's, admin staff. And I probably email with people that you wouldn't think I email with 20 times a week. And it's not always business related. Sometimes it's, hey, I got this going on. What would you do? Right? How do you choose between X and Y? How do you decide if you can take on one more committee chairmanship role at the same time, right? And at the same time, I've done some personal things. I mean, I've gotten pretty close with the folks on the governmental affairs side of NPGA. I'm very close with Mike Baker. I'm becoming more close with Jessica Johnson, and I'm sure I will with the other folks who are new to Mike's admin team. But the folks who were here while I was propane pack chair, I mean, I still have all their cell phone numbers. We still chat once in a while. When I go to DC in June, I'm pretty sure I'm going to meet up with a couple of the past NPGA folks. Both of you probably remember Peter Farrell. I still talk to Peter Farrell on a pretty regular basis, and I'll probably end up seeing him when I'm in DC in a few months. And he's been out of our industry for, Bridget, you could probably guess as good as me, 4 years, 5 years. Mm-hmm. It's those kind of relationships that, to me, make it worth participating and being active in the industry.
Chad, speaking about those people that you've gotten to know in the past, and the engagement and the the people you surround yourself with. 2013, you were kind of introduced to something outside of the office life, right? You're in the propane industry. You went to you said it was propane days, or right at Capitol Hill in 2013. What has changed since then? Like, it was really easy to meet these people and talk to them in person. And then, 7 years later, we go through COVID and things kind of shut down. You have to maintain these relationships now with texting or calling or video chats like this. And now it's kind of opened back up again. What has it changed in your eyes for that leadership role from the first time you were exposed outside of your business to now?
Well, First of all, the first time I walked into an NPGA meeting, I was the youngest person in the room by 20 years, maybe more. Um, and, it probably was more. I mean, it might have been 25, 30 years. Um, I got introduced to a lot of folks by my father-in-law, by other folks from the Wisconsin Association. Um, I got to know, the NPGA folks that were running the show at the time pretty close, and they'd introduced me to people. Um, but once I got involved to the point where I was going to be on a committee and participate, um, the way we communicated was in person all the time, right? Um, and I think that's good and bad. I think it was good at the time. With that said, I think that now, um, I'm really glad we have the opportunity to do this, right? Sit in front of a computer, multiple states away from each other. It's like we're almost there, except, we're not. Um, but this is a good thing. I can be more active in my industry because of some of this, right? I can't fly to Washington, D.C. or Bird Island, Minnesota, and sit down and have this video recorded with you guys. I don't have the time for it. And I don't have the bandwidth for it, right? And I think that's part of the deal with NPGA in general, right? I think we're starting to see it get a little bit younger. We're starting to see programs like 40 under 40 or 30 under 30 or whatever the number is.
30 under 30.
Yeah, sorry, 30 under 30. I don't fit into either. And then, the youth council,
Youth Professional Council.
youth
Yeah.
professionals council, which is everybody under 40, which I still don't fit in, but anymore. Um, but I start to see these things take off that I wish were there when we did it. Um, it gives the opportunity for, younger folks to be more active, and companies not have to necessarily shell out massive amounts of travel dollars to allow them to be active. Um, I think that over time you can overdo that, right? I think that you can get too far into too many programs that people just can't participate enough in. But at the same time, I think that, we need to find the sweet spot in that. I'm not sure when Young Gassers was started. I became a member of it when I was probably 28 at a trade show. But most of the members of Young Gassers belong in Ancient Gassers. So, coming with new programs that fit the lifestyles and the business, or the work lifestyle, if you will, of today's generation, I think is important. I couldn't be on the executive committee if we didn't do at least one, but we're probably going to do 3 out of the 4 meetings virtually. I know, but with that said, I wouldn't be part of the executive committee if we did them all virtually. I'm not one for this is the only way we meet. The benchmarking council meetings via Zoom for a year and a half did not work. We lost a bunch of members. Now we're trying to rebuild. Um, you need to have that balance, and I think everybody's kind of on board with kind of the mix we have now, right? Get in person when you can. Meet this way via Zoom, not you're not meeting via podcast, but meet via Zoom or conference call when you can't. And it's just a better way to run a nationwide organization and get more people involved.
Chad, one thing I would talk about, I think we've spent a lot of time talking about NPGA, which is wonderful, but not everybody can participate at the national level, right? And maybe within their organization, they're not the right person. What advice would you give? The state associations are also there, but outside of the federation structure, right? What advice would you give to somebody maybe who, unlike us, I think all of us, don't fit in the 30 under 30 or the 40 under 40 and all these groups, right? What advice would you give them to kind of hone their leadership skills and start to get out and advance professionally in the industry, on behalf of the industry, or even outside of that?
Yeah, it's an easy answer. Things that look like the benchmarking council locally would be great for anybody who wants to improve their talent and gain the leadership capabilities. Most of the states around the country have family business organizations, where any generation can participate, and at the same token, people who aren't family members but who are employed by family members are oftentimes invited into those organizations to, hone their skills, if you will. One of the most interesting, it's a great question, right? So I've focused on NPGA things, right? I work with my brother-in-law. He's a couple years older than me. He's got 3 kids. I've got 2. I do the travel. He still wants to be active, and his role. He has joined what used to be called Tech. Now it's called Vistage International, I think. But basically, it's a benchmarking group for like-minded professionals, right? So, and it's local. It's not travel to meet with marketers from 10 different states, right? It's meeting with 10 different CFOs from the Milwaukee area, for instance.
Mm-hmm.
He's joined a group now that's still under that same organization, that is Next Gen Business Owners. And that works really well for him. It is all next gen business owners, but they offer things for CFOs, CEOs, management, safety professionals, all the way down the line. And those types of organizations are available from a lot of places. In certain parts of the country, there's chambers of commerce that run them, and I've known people who've been part of them and then come into other groups that I'm part of. So my suggestion is to get involved locally in something if you can't do the travel. And if your business or your company isn't willing to, necessarily get behind it, but you want to further your involvement on your own, those organizations are great. And my opinion of what I know of Women in Propane is another good example of the folks whose companies just don't want to foot a big bill. And I think this youth leadership council will do the same thing, right? There's going to be places for folks to get involved without having to outlay a ton of cash, and without outlaying a ton of time on an employee's clock. I can guarantee you that they will spend less time in a year working through Zoom calls or whatever else with organizations like Women in Propane or the Youth Leadership Council than I spend on an airplane. Uh, but it's probably as beneficial to them at the point in their careers as what I'm doing for the industry outside of that.
Yeah, I think it's an interesting trend that's happening, not unique to the propane industry, but any professional trade association. And, there was a shift during COVID, after COVID, that work-life balance, whatever that means. The demands on people's time are so much more significant, and the comparison and value of time at work or time away or time with your family and time away has been called into question. And where I think the professional associations have fallen on the upside is, as long as you're providing value, whether it's networking or education or whatever that may be, that value pendulum swings on the side of those organizations, whether it's NPGA, PERC, or your local chamber of commerce. It's pretty low hanging fruit and kind of low risk to participate and just try something.
There's 2 contributing factors to that, right? So at least that I see. The other thing that's changed is I'm no longer the youngest person in the room, right? I think the people in the room are getting younger than they were 10 years ago. The last generation, probably during COVID, has handed a lot of that down and said, here, you guys do the travel work. You guys do some of this. And now all of a sudden, the folks who are in the organization are no longer 20 or 30 years older than I was. They are now closer to my age and have kids. And I think that's part of the contributing factor to what changed that dynamic. Whereas,
100%.
right, it's no longer grandkids you're working around. It's your kids you're working around. And the other thing I would tell you on that is I have gone out of my way to make it understood here at home, right? Our business, our family, that I want to be involved in these organizations. I want to do what's right for the industry. I need to involve my family. And my wife travels with me probably 3 or 4 times a year. And my kids travel with me for work 1 or 2 times a year. Obviously, they like to go to the nice places. But
there's those perks.
Yeah, if there's
The
golf involved, my family's in. So,
but it's for the organization's planning and recruiting and trying to retain. It's a big opportunity to include families and make I know at Perk we try to limit the amount of time required so that you can get home to the baseball game, and we're cognizant of graduation season, so that we aren't asking somebody to choose between.
Yeah, and we see on the benchmarking council side too. We do a survey like every 2 years to try to pick places to go, and we're seeing folks ask for a little bit more of that. One time a year, let's go to some place where we can bring our families. Let's make it a resort style place instead of a high rise downtown Milwaukee. Let's go find out how to. I mean, right now we're contemplating between someplace upstate New York and Tucson, Arizona, at a resort, for one of the meetings in 2025. But that's just a change because pre-COVID, they wanted to be at the closest hotel to the airport so they could get in and get out and move on with life, right? But they knew they were going to sit in a hotel room for a day and a half of benchmarking. So you're seeing the shift there to a little bit more. Let's try to involve family if we can once in a while, right?
Yeah. It makes it a little bit more palatable and interesting to seek leadership roles.
It does.
Right? If you don't have to choose so much between which hat you're wearing.
I would agree with that.
Yeah, and you hit on the head. When I look at a lot of leaders in the industry now, even at RCC, it's all young professionals that have families, and to get them more engaged, you have to make it a family atmosphere. So that's great information, Chad. I love hearing about that. A true family guy, puts family first, but yet I'm going to go above and beyond to make sure that you are out there in the industry, because I think you play a bigger role than you think you do. But it's always fun to see how humble you are with all of your answers. So I appreciate that as well. What do you think, Bridget? Should we head to the whip round? Chad, are you ready to loosen up the collar a little bit and have some fun questions thrown your way?
Collar doesn't get loose here. It's all by the book.
I will say real quick, just a real fast disclaimer. One, actually not a disclaimer, sorry. Jessica Johnson, you threw her name out there. She's behind all these podcasts. So I just want to give her a shout out. It's fun that she's part of the NPGA right now. She's the executive producer of the Women Propane podcast. So I just want to tell her thanks for getting all this organized. But with that being said, go ahead, Bridget, kick it off to the whip round.
All right. We have talked a lot about your involvement in the propane industry. So now I'm very curious about this. If you were not in the propane industry, what would you be doing as a career?
Church organist.
Is this the part where I get the big long break to think about it?
Think about it? Yeah. Penny's a master editor.
Yeah, good. Well, she hasn't had to bleep anything yet. If I were to tell you the truth, I'm sure I'd be working in an industry that I would buy into as much as this one. I can guarantee you that it would be way less political. Or sorry, I shouldn't say that. my involvement would be way less political. But with that said, I originally thought that I was going to go into agriculture and management when I went to school. Um, but I realized real fast that if I wanted to have a lifestyle that included playing golf or doing anything with kids at that point, agriculture wasn't the way to go.
No.
If I wasn't sitting in this seat right here today, I think I would be probably sitting in some type of safety director type of role somewhere. It's just kind of always been in the back of my mind. I always think about everything twice, like what if, right? So
Hmm.
probably my role somewhere.
Great.
Chad, you sit down, you're going to grab a book, you're going to write this book about your life. Chad Kroening, VP at Belky Bottled Gas. What would that title of the book be if you could write a book about your life or your career?
The title is probably something like I wouldn't do it any other way, right? I mean,
that's awesome.
I don't think that there. It's why it was hard for me to answer the last question, right? It's probably not any other way I'd want to do it. I'd want to be as involved as I was. I'd want to take on the projects I took on. I want to meet the people I met. You guys are perfect examples, right? I can walk down a hall anywhere in a bar, it's crowded, whatever the deal is, and you all recognize me. You all say hi to me. You all shake my hand, give me a hug, whatever the deal is when we pass anywhere. And I wouldn't. That's how it is with a lot of people that I know from this industry, and I wouldn't have it any other way.
I love that.
I love
That's
it.
great.
But I can't write, and I can't. And I don't like reading, so it'll be an audiobook.
Well, you got the title.
That's nice. All right. This is a new one, a new addition to the rotation. What was the last gift you received?
Pro V1 golf balls from RCC.
I haven't gotten those yet. They're still in the mail, I think. But it is funny. The last thing I probably received was golf balls from somebody. I'm pretty sure.
Yeah, good. And Father's Day is just around the corner.
I was going to say, yep. Whoever's listening. So, Chad, this is a new question too, and I like these. Bridget threw these in for the expo. What do you think about when you're alone?
I'm a musically challenged guy, right? I like to be an organist. There's a lot of music going through my head all the time. I'm a church organist, so most of it is church music, which is probably a little weird for most people. But it's funny how, like, if I'm just sitting somewhere in a hotel room, whatever the deal is, trying to fall asleep or something like that, there's a lot of music going through my head.
Mm-hmm. All right, my last question. If you could describe yourself in one word, what would it be?
It's the part where she's going to have to bleep it. One word. I don't know if I can describe myself in one word. Probably. Yeah, this will take a while. We'll be cutting a lot of dead time out of this one.
It's a hard one. Even one or two, 3 words. Yeah.
I mean, I would say that it is engaging. Probably.
Yeah. That makes sense.
Answer. Yeah.
Everything that you listed off in this podcast.
Yeah, right.
Pretty heavily engaged. And not just in the industry, but even in the community. That's pretty remarkable. Well, awesome. That's all we had, Chad, Bridget. One last, actually, let's just finish it with this, Chad. For all the viewers, listeners right now, whether they're watching it or listening to it, What advice do you want to give to all the people that are participating in this podcast?
Well, I'd give quick advice, but I don't do anything quickly. So my advice would be take a leadership role when you can. Make sure to spend the time you should with your family at the same time, and try to mix those two things together, because it makes leadership more fun and it makes your family understand what you do and why you do it. At the end of the day, when I get asked to do things, the first thing I do is go ask my family if they're okay with it. And some of these things take up a lot of time, but some of these things make some of these things make my kids have funny responses nowadays, right? It's kind of like, hey, they want me to do something else at NPGA, and my kids immediately turn that around to, does that mean we get to go play golf at this place?
Well, I thought there would be like encouraging, like, yeah, go take the opportunity, Dad. No, it's your golf course there.
Yeah, and my kids have both played golf with NPGA folks. My daughter's played golf in an event that Tucker was part of, and have met him. And it's really interesting, like the relationships that I've made that I further on the golf course with my kids mean even more, right? Because, I mean, I get text messages and phone calls from NPGA folks asking me when the last time I beat my daughter at golf was, all the time. And I told them I'll let them know when the next time is.
Yeah.
So
awesome.
That's great. Well, thanks, Chad. This has been really fun.
Yep. Thanks, Chad.
All right.
This has been another episode of Through the Leadership Lens, presented by Women in Propane. Be sure to subscribe, download, and share with a friend. To learn more about Women in Propane, visit us on Facebook, Instagram, or online at www.womeninpropane.org. I'm Freddie Riddler.
And I'm Bridget Kidd. Thanks for listening. Until next time.